Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Live It Up. This is the show where we explore and discuss how to take your life to that next level and beyond. We cover health, wealth, relationships, and how to create a life that feels really good, because ultimately, that's what we all want. We want to feel good. I'm your host and coach, Fletcher Ellingson, and to my right we have Amy Ellingson. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, what are we going to be talking about on the show today?
Influenza.
Influenza. There's a lot of new stuff to cover about that, right?
Yeah, because we have COVID now too.
Yeah. Okay. We will be back after the commercial break to talk about that. So stick around, because remember, health is the first wealth. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that if you have questions that you'd like us to answer on or off the air, email them directly to me at fletcher@fletcherellingson.com. You don't need to suffer. There are answers and solutions and ways to get unstuck and move forward powerfully. So, it's at this point that we usually answer an email, but today we're going to do something a little different. In the spirit of feeling good and focusing on what's working well, we want to share some good news in a world where much of it creates uncertainty or feels disappointing or bleak and depressing. So we want to share with you some feel-good news, because whatever we focus on, we feel, and whatever we focus on expands, and whatever we focus on consistently, ultimately, we manifest. So let's talk about some things that are working well in the world.
Okay.
All right.
Go for it. You're going to go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yes.
So the city of Marseille, France, has long held the title of France's dirtiest city.
Wow.
Not a nice title.
No, it's not a nice title.
And this is really cool. It's kind of it's happened as a result of the lockdowns during COVID. A lot of people started cleaning things up, and restaurants were cleaning things up, and homeowners and apartment owners were cleaning things up. And after the lockdown expired, they kind of said, "Wow, look at how clean everything is. It feels really good. We'd like to really enforce this and make this. We don't want it to go back to how it was." So they did a couple things. They started banning smoking on a number of their beaches there, and they began implementing fines for litter, which I'm a big fan of. Fines for litter.
Fines for litter. Okay.
And one of the fines was particularly for cigarette butts, because apparently there are loads of smoking and cigarette butts in France, and specifically in the city. And what happens, these guys are on the Mediterranean, and so a lot of this just gets swept into the sea. And to give you an example of how prolific it is, there was a group of kids who went and volunteered to pick up cigarette butts outside the Eiffel Tower on the lawn. And in 1 hour, they picked up 10,000.
Wow.
10,000.
Wow.
So anyway, so this is cool that they decided, hey, let's clean things up and let's keep them a little cleaner.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going next.
Yeah, go.
So the state of Assam, India, created a new program designed to empower young girls and help them create independence. So basically, so they could ultimately go to college. So what they decided to do was that any girl who passed their final exam, so like finishing what we would call high school, that they would be given a motorized scooter. And so it ends up being about 22,000 girls. And so if they get a 60% on the exam, which means they passed, they're given this motorized scooter. And the purpose of it is to get them to go to college, really, or get them to do something else, like a job where they can be independent, because it's not very safe to walk, and people that were citing safety issues and other issues as to why they couldn't go to college, why they couldn't continue their education. So that was really cool to help empower young women to take their education even further by giving them motorized scooters.
Yeah, transportation is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. I like that. That feels good. And I like this one too. So it says, Vermont passed a statewide ban on food waste. It aims at reducing the amount of food waste ending up in landfills, where it turns into methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, which we learned about recently too in a movie. And instead, it can be collected and composted, and that compost in turn can be used to enrich soil, which is super valuable for agriculture and helping reduce greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
And I love that, like they did that on a statewide level. And I know it's a smaller state, but super cool. And I think we learned also recently that San Francisco implemented this as well. And they also gave a unique incentive, or de-incentive. I'm not sure which one, but there's a can out there, and if you're not using it, then you have to pay for it. If you do use it, you don't have to pay for it, which is because it incentivizes you to put all your food scraps in there.
That's cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. All right, so we're going to be back in a minute. We're going to be talking about influenza and the new information that's out regarding this year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, stay with us. Hey everybody, welcome back to Live It Up. Today we are talking about influenza as it relates to COVID and all that stuff. So let's get to it with our expert here, Amy. So first of all, is influenza the flu? Because people seem to use that word flu for many types of sickness.
Yeah, so the flu is used very broadly by non-medical people, meaning all kinds of variety of ailments, stomach bugs, if you felt flu-ish, and so... but what we mean when we talk about the flu, if you read an article, a medical article or something, or in the news, it's going to be influenza. And influenza is a viral infection that causes respiratory symptoms, not stomach issues, which people frequently call the flu. And millions of people get the flu every year, and hundreds of thousands of people are hospitalized, tens of thousands of people die from flu-related causes every year. I know people have heard more about the flu, I feel like, since COVID has been in our lives because people are kind of comparing it to the flu.
Yeah. So what are some of the symptoms of influenza then?
So the symptoms of influenza are usually pretty classic, where people have almost always have a fever. That's just usually 100%. I mean, it's not 100%, but very high rate of people get a fever, a significant fever. People usually have really bad body aches. They feel like their body is it is so achy. It feels painful. They frequently have a headache and a cough. People usually feel really sick. And what I find in my office is people come in, they just look miserable and they feel so bad. But then when you go to examine them, you cannot find anything wrong on exam. I mean, their lungs are clear, their throat looks normal, they don't have strep, it looks okay. And that is classic for flu. It can be a much more serious infection, especially in people over age 65, in children under age 5, in pregnant women, and people that have lung problems or problems with their immune system.
All right, so now we've got COVID out there. How can you tell the difference between the two?
Yeah, we're going into that season. I actually just got my flu shot yesterday. It still hurts. And it's going to be tricky. So both are caused by viruses, but they are totally different viruses. They're not even from the same family. They have some similarities, but they also are different. Both can cause fever, cough, body aches, sometimes vomiting and diarrhea, especially in children. Both can result in pneumonia, although COVID definitely has a certain appearance on CT scan that influenza does not necessarily do. And both flu and COVID can be mild or very serious, although usually in flu, you're not going to have super mild symptoms. You're usually going to get pretty sick from it. A few of the ways that the symptoms of COVID are different from influenza. Influenza tends to come on pretty quickly, where you just wake up feeling really sick and you get really sick in one day. COVID tends to come on a little more slowly, and then also you don't have the loss of taste and smell in influenza like you do with COVID. The other thing is with COVID, usually kids are not going to have symptoms. I mean, of course they can. We know that they have the virus, but they can be asymptomatic, where influenza is not. Even like last year, we saw really high influenza activity in the schools around here. Young kids get it, high school kids get it, and where COVID tends to be asymptomatic in that population.
And so the influenza, if you have it, you're going to have symptoms.
Usually, yeah. And young people are going to have symptoms for sure. And just a little bit of how the spreading of the viruses, they both can be spread person to person between people that are in close contact with each other. And both are spread from droplets made from when people cough, sneeze, or talk. So those droplets land in someone else's mouth, nose, eyes, or on a surface that then you get into your eyes, mouth, nose. That one of the differences with COVID is that we don't necessarily know a lot about it, but that it seems to be aerosolized, which people have said, where there's stuff in the air for longer than we have found that flu lasts. And the other thing is there seem to be these super spreading events in COVID that we have not seen historically with influenza.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a way to prevent catching the flu, and is it different than how you would prevent catching COVID?
Well, luckily, it's really not different than how you prevent getting COVID for on the basics. And so for sure, you can prevent getting both of them. Flu season tends to start in the fall and it goes through the spring. And so usually during those times of year, when I actually was reading my presentation from last year, when I talked about influenza, we didn't have COVID. And so it's like, well, don't touch your mouth or your nose in a public space. But now it's wear a mask in a public space. I mean, that wasn't even on our radar last flu season. But this flu season, it's like, so not only should you be not touching your eyes, but your mouth and nose should be covered. Mm-hmm. And obviously places where there's lots of people around, like stores, airports, schools, those are some examples where there's going to be, potential for a lot of infection. What some of the countries in the southern hemisphere have found, because they already went through flu season, is that their flu season was actually a bit lighter because people have been masked and people are taking extra precautions. And so it not only was effective for preventing COVID rates from increasing, but it also was helpful in reducing the number of influenza cases. And like I always say, is like it's really important to stay hydrated. It's really important to get enough sleep. It's important not to stress your body with drinking too much alcohol or eating too much sugar. And then obviously if you're sick at all, then you don't want to be around anybody else because that's how they're going to get it.
I'm just curious, after we kind of get through COVID, and then we just have kind of our traditional flu seasons, I wonder if people will be more inclined to mask up during those seasons, Yeah,
so that's been discussed in some of the medical journals because there are a lot of countries, especially some of the Asian countries, where they are masked all flu season.
Right.
And some of them are masked all the time in crowded public spaces. So I think that our approach to influenza may change, Yeah,
or at least it may be more acceptable if you see somebody, or more commonplace.
Yeah.
So, one more question before we go to break. Can you have the coronavirus and the flu at the same time?
It is the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. It is possible, but it is not very likely. So in the countries that again kind of went through that at the same time, and we went through a little bit of it because our country started having it in flu season, but it looks like it's probably about a 10% chance. So if someone came in and they were tested positive for flu, there might be about a 10% chance that they also have coronavirus at the same time. And if you do have them both at the same time, you obviously could get much more sick than if you just had one. We do have tests for both, and so actually we're in the process of really considering, as I'm sure all clinics are, how are we going to deal with this? What is going to be our clinical pathway? If someone presents with symptoms that we're not sure if they're COVID or influenza, because there definitely is we won't be able to tell, really.
Right.
By physical exam, we won't be able to tell. Strep throat, you could tell, but the other two, you can't really tell. So we're going to have to test them. And so it's going to be some sort of nasal swab, and we'll probably have to test for both to know which one it is.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Thanks for that information. We're going to go to break, and then we're going to be back with a few more questions, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to Live It Up. We're here talking with Amy about the flu. We're talking about COVID, and right now we're going to talk about the flu shot.
Yes.
Those are advertised everywhere. I know you get one annually.
Just yesterday.
Yep, just yesterday. And tell us, should we be getting these? What's up with that? Well,
I'm a huge proponent of them, and the flu vaccination does reduce the risk of flu illness between about 40 and 60% during the population if it's a pretty well-matched flu vaccine. And so some of the benefits of getting the flu vaccine are reduced deaths from influenza, reduced ICU admissions, preventing millions of doctor's visits each year. And this year it'd even be more important because if you have a fever and a cough, we don't know whether you have COVID or not, and it's like you're going to have to get multiple tests, and then what if someone having to be quarantined for, then you're going to miss work. And so it's going to be really in your best interest to get the flu shot this year, so you can prevent getting influenza, not only for your health, but also just the inconvenience of it and the drama of it and everything that may happen at work and with your household. The other thing that influenza vaccine does is it protects vulnerable people in your household from getting sick. So if you have someone in your house that's over age 65, or you're going to be around them who has lung disease, chemotherapy, And then in pregnant women, vaccination within the flu vaccine reduces acute infection by about a half. So it's really important, especially for pregnant women.
So tell me this. Some vaccines you get 1 or 2 and you're good for life. Why do we have to get a flu shot annually?
Yeah, because of the influenza virus changes all the time, the actual virus, the DNA of the virus. So how it appears to your body, how it appears to your immune system each year is going to be different. So unfortunately, it is a virus that mutates a lot, just like the common cold virus mutates a lot as well. That's one of the reasons why we haven't been able to find like a vaccine for that or some way to help people with that. So a flu shot is formulated every year. It's unique each year, and it has a combination of multiple strains of influenza nowadays. And so experts actually pick which viruses and which strains are going to go into the vaccine many months in advance, because you need that time to make all of those vaccines, because most of the flu vaccine is actually grown inside chicken eggs. And so you actually have to wait for this gestation period, of the virus in these chicken eggs. So the flu vaccine is then given to you, and then you create antibodies. In about 2 weeks, you should be kind of ready to fight off influenza if you were exposed with it.
All right, so help me understand antibodies, since you just mentioned it. What are they, and also, can you get the flu from getting the shot?
Yeah, so your body is, as I always talk about, it's like this incredibly sophisticated machine. And as we go through life, our bodies are exposed to billions of germs. I mean, all the time we're exposed to stuff. You touch a surface, you're exposed. You breathe in air, you're exposed to different germs. And as your body sees a new germ that it hasn't seen before, it quickly makes these sickness-fighting cells to fight the current threat that's in your body, kind of take care of that. But it also creates like a blueprint. It creates a memory cell. So if and when you're ever exposed to that germ in the future, that you would be able to mount an immune response to that germ a bit more quickly and more effectively. So by getting the flu vaccine, which does not have any active virus, so you cannot get sick. You cannot get the flu from getting the vaccine. The one thing you can do is you can get a little bit achy, you can get a little bit tired because your body is mounting an immune response to that vaccine, but you shouldn't get a cough or anything respiratory-wise from the vaccine because it does not have a live virus in it.
Got it. Okay. Can someone get seasonal flu even though they got the flu vaccine?
Yeah, so it is possible to get sick with the flu even if you've been vaccinated. And the reason that would be possible is, number one, you could have been exposed to influenza right before you got the vaccine, or you could have been exposed to it shortly after you got the vaccine and you didn't have those antibodies yet. You could have been exposed to a strain of the virus that was not included in the vaccine this year. You also could have not mounted antibodies for some reason. That's actually why they have the high dose vaccine for people over age 65, is because people in that age group don't tend to mount as much of an antibody response. So protection from the flu vaccine does kind of vary. It's not 100%, but it's better than nothing.
Got it. So let's say someone wakes up and they feel like they have symptoms of influenza. What should they do?
Yeah, I mean, this year it's really tricky because of COVID. So I feel like, if you are young and healthy and you're doing okay, aside from being sick, then you really should assume you either have influenza or COVID. These days we're doing a lot of phone visits, and so you could always do a phone visit with the doctor. You could make sure, they could ask you the right questions and maybe even arrange for you to get a swab. The reason that it would make a difference if you have influenza versus COVID is because of quarantine period. So back when you had influenza, or back when we only had influenza, we would say, well, when the cough is gone, when you haven't had a fever for 24 to 48 hours, you should be good to go, or if it's been 7 days. But nowadays, we can't really quite say that unless we know for sure that it's influenza. If you know for sure it's influenza, you're only going to know that because you've gone to the doctor and you know that from them, and they would give you instructions on what to do for that. So because if it is influenza, then you can just kind of take care of yourself in your room, quarantining until you don't have a fever anymore. If it's COVID, then that's a whole nother story.
Okay. And so what do you recommend if you are a family member of someone with the flu?
Yeah, so again, it's a different conversation because of COVID, but I would treat that person like they have COVID until you know if they don't or they do. And then there are some really great resources at the CDC website. There's a ton of information there, and there's a ton of information there about how flu and COVID are different and what to do with both. But if you know that someone has influenza, you would want to, you guys should be masked up if you're in the same room. You should take the same precautions really that you would for COVID. It's just that the quarantine period is going to be different.
Yeah, I think there's going to be, again, a wider acceptance of, even if somebody has the flu and you know for a fact that they've just got influenza, suddenly masking up and the whole quarantining thing is now more acceptable.
Yeah, well, who had a mask in their house last November, December? Nobody had a mask. Most people didn't have a mask in their house.
Right.
So, and the other thing that I had forgotten to say up here is that we do have medications for influenza. So if it's caught early, and especially if you're in a high-risk group, we do have medications that can help shorten the course of the illness. And so if you are someone that's higher risk, that's another reason to have a phone visit. But this year, I would really recommend a phone visit. If you think you have influenza or COVID, you want to try to arrange a phone visit. And what we've been doing is we might start the visit on the phone, and again, maybe have them come in and get a swab, or maybe have them come in and listen to their lungs and make sure and check their oxygen saturation, make sure they're okay. But we don't do the whole visit in the office, just to help reduce the risk of spreading.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good information. Any final message before we wrap up here?
Well, I think that the one thing I would say is that to prevent influenza, it's the same stuff to prevent yourself from getting coronavirus. And I know people are getting tired of the coronavirus precautions. I am getting tired of them. I'm getting tired of having to, manage my teenage children, and like they're being disappointed they can't do things. All the other parents are doing one thing, and then I'm saying to do another thing. And it's difficult to keep kind of controlling ourselves and not doing these things, talk about having wantings,
Yeah.
But I think that I would really encourage people just to try to maintain protecting yourself, washing your hands a lot, wearing a mask, social distancing, making sure if you have any symptoms of feeling sick, stay home, keep yourself in your room, and get a phone visit with a provider and see what to do.
Right. And know that this is all going to pass.
It's going to pass. Yeah, I know I wish it were shorter. I kept thinking it would be over sooner, back when this first started, and it's taking a lot longer than any of us wanted.
Yeah. But be persistent, be diligent.
Yeah.
And
stay healthy. And take care of yourself. We didn't talk about this too, but taking vitamin D, I believe in that. I do that myself. Getting great sleep, not stressing your body out with a bunch of sugar and a bunch of alcohol, and exercising, practicing, being happy is good for your body.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All good stuff. All right. Well, it's time now for you to get out there, be a source of kindness, be a source of contribution. You have something to offer this world, and we believe in you.